Welcome to Daily Drive for Monday, April 13th, 2026. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Kellen Walker. Today on the show, Nissan will debut its new Rogue as hybrid only, VW and Audi post brutal first quarter numbers, and new steel and aluminum tariff math could cost automakers more. Plus, we'll hear from the NTSB's Kristen Poland about why the agency is investigating crashes involving Ford BlueCruise and the challenges that Level 2 systems present for regulators.
Those short glances aren't enough. The driver needs more time to re-engage, and that's where the system can't be reset. It shouldn't be reset with those short glances.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Nissan is making a big bet on hybrids with its next Rogue crossover, launching it late this year as hybrid only, with a gas version following in 2027. It's a catch-up play, Nissan America's chairman Christian Mounier told Automotive News. They're late to the hybrid party, but he expects the e-Power hybrid to become more than half of Rogue sales within 2 years. The company needs it. Rogue sales have been sliding for years, while rivals like Toyota and Honda dominate the hybrid market, which now makes up a quarter of compact crossover sales. Volkswagen and Audi are having a rough start to 2026. VW sales dropped 16% in the first quarter to just under 74,000 vehicles. That's the brand's fourth straight quarterly decline. Audi had it even worse. According to the Automotive News Research and Data Center, sales plunged 30% to under 30,000 deliveries. That's the brand's weakest quarter since early 2012. Audi blamed tariffs and market headwinds. The brand also raised prices across the board last year. And the Trump administration just changed how it calculates steel and aluminum tariffs. And while the new math is simpler, it could actually cost automakers more. Here's the deal. Derivative products now face a 25% tariff on their entire value instead of a 50% duty on just the metal inside. Sounds better, right? Not so fast. Here to explain it all is our own John Irwin, who's been covering the story for us at Automotive News. John, a pleasure as always, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Seems simpler, right? But it sounds like this might actually cost automakers more. So I'm wondering if maybe you can walk us through an example of how this new tariff calculation actually works and why it might end up costing more.
Yeah, like you said, it's on the surface, it seems simpler, and it is simpler. It's not to be dismissed, but yeah, it could cost more. I mean, if you take a hypothetical example of just a part or the robot, what have you, let's say it's worth $1,000 for simplicity's sake here. You're importing that, and it has $200 worth of foreign aluminum in it. In the past, you would pay 50% on that $200 just on the value of that aluminum, which of course would make your tariff bill for that good robot, whatever it is, $100. Now you're paying a 25% tariff on the entire value of that good, which would bring your tariff bill. It's 25% of $1,000, so that's $250. That's a pretty sizable increase. Obviously, that's just a hypothetical example. Automakers, suppliers are still really sorting through this. It was an executive order that was signed at the beginning of the month, went into effect just a few days later. It's very much something that's still being sorted through. Obviously, there are going to be scenarios where, maybe the total tariff costs for any given import will, come out to be, maybe about the same. There could even be some examples where maybe the tariff bill is lower, but I think just talking with some of the trade experts that advise suppliers and automakers in their decision-making on tariffs and that sort of thing, I think a lot of them are expecting the tariff bill to be higher, in large part because just that basic math, but then also, the Trump administration isn't at this moment looking to reduce tariff revenue, especially after the Supreme Court decision recently. They're looking to, if anything, increase that revenue moving forward. So any move that they're looking to make broadly won't be designed to decrease tariff revenue overall. That said, like I said, it is simpler, much simpler. Automakers and suppliers especially have really in the past lamented just how difficult it was to calculate, exactly how much of any given import and its value comes from steel or aluminum in it. That can be really tricky and difficult to do, and you have to go really deep into your supply chains in certain cases, and in many cases it just proved to be extremely difficult, time consuming, in some cases even almost impossible to figure out. Obviously this will be a lot simpler. You kind of know what the value is going in, but the tariff bill could be higher for certain imports, that's for sure.
It's been about a year, a little over a year now since the tariffs are in place. Where are we at right now? What are you hearing from auto companies about the ongoing changes to how all these things are calculated?
Yeah, it's definitely something where, once they feel like they have kind of a good sense of where they're at, there's usually some sort of change. We've seen that this year with obviously the Supreme Court decision earlier this year. And now with these, steel and aluminum tariff changes. So there are things on the horizon too that companies are keeping an eye on. We've talked in the past about, the USMCA and, what does the future of Canadian and Mexican trade with the US look like? But, companies have, on the one hand, kind of to an extent gotten used to, just these rapid changes. Like I said, this steel and aluminum change, the executive order, or the presidential proclamation, I should say, was signed, in early April and went into effect, the following Monday. It was just a few days later. And that can be difficult for companies to figure out exactly how much of a difference that's going to make in their overall tariff bill at the end of the day, which can prove tricky, especially for suppliers that are dealing with it can take months sometimes for them to negotiate with their suppliers or with their customers to try to figure out if they want to push tariff costs up the supply chain up to their customers. That you have to come up to an agreement obviously with your customer. So that's something that they're going to have to do again, if they just kind of figured out in the past few months how that was going to look. Well, now that calculation has changed. So, you're kind of back to the bargaining table. But again, that's not anything new. I mean, there's just been, kind of one change after another over the past year or so. Companies have sort of found a way to, maybe not get used to it. It might not be the right way to put it, but it's not new. And I think it's fair to expect that to continue, especially with the USMCA on the horizon. We're going to see kind of where those negotiations land. Obviously, that's going to be really important for the auto industry, and no matter what happens, it's going to have a pretty significant impact on automakers and suppliers. So yeah, they're always on their toes right now. That's for sure.
Well, John Irwin has been covering every twist and turn for us. He's been with us through the entire roller coaster. John, really appreciate you joining us today to explain this.
Thanks so much.
Coming up, the NTSB's Kristen Poland talks about why the agency began its investigations into Ford BlueCruise crashes. That's next on Daily Drive. Are you a dealer creating a workplace culture your employees are proud to be part of? Applications are now open for the 2026 Automotive News Best Dealerships to Work For program. This isn't just an award, it's a chance to get real insight into what's working at your dealership and where you can improve. And we've expanded the categories this year, recognizing everything from technician experience and leadership development to AI enablement and employee retention. The registration deadline is April 17th. Find out more and apply at autonews.com. Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jake Neer. The National Transportation Safety Board is looking into fatal crashes involving Ford's BlueCruise hands-free driving system. Kristen Poland is Deputy Director of the NTSB's Office of Highway Safety. On the latest episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast, she talks with our own Molly Boygan about why the agency is looking into those crashes and how Level 2 systems present new challenges for regulators. Here's a piece of that conversation.
Dr. Kristen Poland, Deputy Director of the NTSB's Office of Highway Safety, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us, Molly.
So the NTSB addressed fatal crashes involving Ford BlueCruise at a board meeting last month, and the NTSB has been investigating the fatal crashes from 2024. Why is this of interest now?
So for the NTSB, we have investigated numerous crashes that involve partial automation systems or SAE Level 2 systems. And these two crashes were involving Ford BlueCruise, but also hands-free aspect. So that was new to us, where it's an L2 system operating hands-free. What was also new for us was the driver monitoring system. So in the past, our investigations have focused on driver monitoring, where we're looking at steering wheel torque as a surrogate for the driver being engaged. And we had criticized those types of systems before, focusing on camera-based systems. The Ford BlueCruise includes a camera-based driver monitoring system. So that was also new to us and gave us information that we wanted to be able to investigate these two crashes to be able to understand what was going on.
Got it. So the fact that it's an L2 hands-free system and also the presence of this camera-based driver monitoring were issues that NTSB wanted to look into a bit more.
Exactly.
And Chairwoman Jennifer Homendy said at the hearing that these systems, or at the board meeting, that these systems function primarily as convenience features rather than safety enhancements. I'm sort of asking you to speak for her, but is that contention applying to all level 2 systems in general, or to all automated driving systems in general? How sort of broad does that go?
So the aspect where we're talking about convenience versus safety is coming from an Insurance Institute for Highway Safety study. And what they were looking at was systems that have L2 capabilities. And the L2 system obviously is the controlling the longitudinal position, either a set cruise speed or a set following distance behind that lead vehicle, and the lateral position, so lane centering. So how do those types of systems, when they're pushed together and we have both the lateral and longitudinal control, compare when we're looking just at the safety aspects to the base systems? So automatic emergency braking systems, electronic stability control systems, lane departure prevention systems. And what the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety was showing was that there wasn't an additional safety benefit when we combined those systems together into an L2 system. They were seeing the safety benefit with those base systems, that automatic emergency braking and lane departure prevention systems. And so that's where they were saying that these systems are really more convenience-based systems. They may reduce driver workload. They may have some convenience aspects in terms of how the driver is interacting with them. But base safety, we're really seeing it from those safety components that are talking about last-minute intervention.
I see. So the real additive value in terms of safety comes from those base systems, things like lane departure prevention and automatic emergency braking, rather than the lateral and longitudinal control of some of level 2 systems.
That's what the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety was bringing out in their study. And of course, that's one of the aspects that we were pulling out in the board meeting last week, was that if our safety is coming from, for example, automatic emergency braking, we want automatic emergency braking to be engaged when we have an L2 system engaged. So we don't want the driver to have a hands-free L2 system, but also be able to turn off automatic emergency braking if that's the system that's giving us the major safety benefit.
Right. And this is something that came up at the board meeting, that BlueCruise allows drivers to disengage automatic emergency braking and tweak the intelligent adaptive cruise control. Is that common across the industry? In other words, how many other manufacturers, or what other share of manufacturers offer drivers the opportunity to disengage AEB when they're operating a level 2 system?
So the NTSB has experience with a couple manufacturers, so I can't speak for the entire industry. But what we're seeing is that there are inconsistencies. And one of our recommendations that came out of that board meeting is focusing on the DOT to provide guidance on what these base systems are that need to be engaged for L2 activation. We're just seeing that there's not a lot of guidance for how manufacturers are adopting L2 systems, and we believe there are safety features that need to be incorporated there. In terms of the speed component, that's something that the NTSB has addressed in other investigations. Speed is a problem. We know that speed represents a huge number of our fatalities. Speed-related crashes are almost a third of the crashes, third of the fatalities that we see on our roads today. So we have other recommendations where we've talked about intelligent speed assistance, whether that's a passive system that just provides a warning or an active system. Importantly, what we were seeing with the Ford BlueCruise is that even if it was engaged, which we don't believe it was engaged, but even if it was engaged, it really gave a huge range that speed limit could be. So if you have a speed limit of 65, you could set the speed limit much higher than that. 20 miles per hour would have been that differential. And of course, in the Philadelphia crash that we investigated, that was in a work zone. the speed limit had been reduced to 45 miles per hour. So the driver, if they had that intelligent speed assist system, still could have set the speed at 65 miles per hour. Of course, we were seeing the driver going over 70 miles per hour, so we know that system wasn't engaged. But again, that comes back to that DOT guidance that we think is essential, that speed needs to be a component in this, because we don't want drivers to hop into a vehicle, have an L2 system that they can set hands-free, and then really allows them to go at unsafe speeds for the environment that they're operating in.
The NTSB's Kristen Poland spoke with our own Molly Boygan on the latest episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast. You can hear the full conversation on Shift, available now wherever you get your podcasts. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jake Neer, in for Kellen Walker. Thanks to our own John Irwin, Jack Walsworth, and Irvaksh Karkaria for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on tech and innovation, tariffs, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a look at Automotive News' 2026 top dealership groups in the U.S. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoyed the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.